Welcome to IFT's Omnivore Presents Side Dish podcast, where we offer a deeper dive into the science, trends, challenges, and innovations shaping our food system. This episode's sponsor is IFT membership. As an IFT member, you'll enjoy a global community united by purpose, driven by science. Become a member today at ift.org/join. I'm your host, Mary Ellen Kuhn, Food Technology Magazine's executive editor. And today we're exploring a topic that sits at the intersection of science, humanitarian need, and global innovation. How food science is helping to feed the world, especially in regions facing chronic food insecurity, conflict, or limited resources. One of the most important efforts in this space is IFT's Food Science for Relief and Development initiative, or FSRD. It's a program that raises awareness of how food science principles are applied to improve food safety, nutrition, stability, and cultural relevance of foods used in relief and development settings. Today, we're joined by two leaders of that initiative, FSRD founder Donna Rosa and FSRD volunteer Randol Rodriguez, to explore how food science is transforming humanitarian food systems and to hear about some of the innovative approaches already in place to advance long-term food security. First, a round of introductions. Our first guest is Donna, who founded and leads the IFT Food Science for Relief and Development initiative. Donna has spent her career working at the intersection of food science, international development, and entrepreneurship, and she's a passionate advocate for food sciences as a vehicle for advancing food security. Welcome, Donna.
Well, hi, Mary Ellen. Thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Randol Rodriguez. With a PhD in food science, Randol's career specializes in food chemistry and product development in the food industry and agriculture. He joined the FSRD initiative as a volunteer writer when it began and now continues to support it by onboarding new members in FSRD's ways of working and as a project coordinator. Welcome, Randol.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. I'm very glad to join both of you here and talk about FSRD.
It is wonderful to have you both here. This is one of the most worthwhile projects, so I'm honored to be discussing it with you. So let's dive in. Donna, can you introduce our listeners to the whole concept of food science for relief and development? I believe that it was born out of a recognition that there was a gap in how the humanitarian and development sectors were approaching food security. Can you share the origin story for FSRD and discuss what problems it was created to solve?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was born out of this gap. When I started to get into international development work, I was put on a lot of sort of agribusiness projects. And I noticed in the food space that there was a lot of focus on agriculture and there was a lot of focus on nutrition, but there wasn't a lot of work being done in terms of processing. Food processing. And I thought, food science could really elevate. It was like, to me, the missing piece. It could really elevate those two things. And of course, you have to grow the food first and it has to be nutritious. But I thought there was a need there for more focus. And then I began to wonder, if IFT could have a place in the development of this whole area. And at the time, it was back in, I think, 2018, something like that. At the time, there wasn't anything like this going on at IFT. And so the whole thing started really with a conversation that I had at the end. It was then the annual meeting with the chair of the international division, Pablo Giuliano. And I should mention that FSRD is an initiative of the international division, and it remains so. And so we had like a long conversation just standing there with cocktails, and he was very interested in it. And so that's how we got started. And, I put together a proposal that sort of went back and forth, and we came out with something that everyone liked at IFT and so forth. And we originally had three teams, and now we're down to just one, which is the case study team. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. And so the reason for this is that I wanted to show real world examples of how food science is being implemented into big contexts. And so we look around for those cases. And so we're up to 29 case studies that are posted on our website, our web page, from across Africa, but also India and Haiti and a few other places. And we cover quite a variety of different food science disciplines, nutrition, food science, safety, storage, mechanization, and so forth. So it's the whole gamut. And that's where we are now.
Well, Randol, from your perspective, why is food science so essential in relief and development contexts? And what makes it different from traditional approaches to food aid?
Of course, yeah. So I think it's essential. If you think about the 4 dimensions of food security, right? We all talk about availability, access, stability, and utilization. If you think of those, going back to Donna's comment about how things have been usually focused on agriculture and nutrition, those two touch some of those. But if you go deeper, food science principles are essential to that, right? They impact safety, they impact shelf life, nutrient stability, and sensory acceptance, right? This is brings a lot of importance because sometimes you can have a good nutritional food or nutritional crop, but then if there is not being consumed and it's not delivering its intended benefit, right? So by using food science, using better processing, better packaging, or storage, we can reduce both harbor losses and increase that availability. We can improve the nutrient stability so that there is better utilization. And then by using consumer and sensory principles, then we can design, and actually we have a few examples of that, we can design a product that offers available food, nutrient food, but then people is looking to consume it and deliver that benefit. So I think that's why it is essential. It just expands on being able to touch those 4 dimensions of what food security is.
Thanks, Randol. One question that I have is I'm wondering if there have been any significant barriers that have prevented food science from being more fully integrated into global relief and development efforts. And I imagine you've thought about this, Donna, and you've been working in this area for a while. What have you observed?
Yeah, this is something I have wondered about a lot. Why is it still under the radar? And I think it's a combination of things. I think there is, first of all, a lack of awareness about food science and maybe a certain myopia. And I think we need to bring more attention to the potential of food science and integrate it better. For example, a lot of food science is already utilized in development and research in relief and development, but they don't realize that it's food science. And so if we point out how food science can help support food safety, that's important. How can food science extend the shelf life and make food available when it's normally not available, and make it safer to use? And how can we scale, from a very small handmade product to, at least a small scale operation. And so there's those aspects of it. But also the term value addition is what's used a lot in the humanitarian space. And I think maybe we ought to use that a little bit more to enable us to relate more to it. And that's taking an agricultural commodity and adding value to it. So further processing it, making it, into something interesting for consumers. So, I think that those are the key things, not recognizing all the disciplines of food science, and then we've always done it this way. We've always worked on agriculture. We've always worked on nutrition, So there's that sort of trap.
So some of it's really awareness, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
And how about you, Randol? Did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I'll say it as well, right? So of course, in going to the awareness, that's why FSRD exists, right? But I also think there is a more or less of a long-term perspective here where, if there is an issue, right, if there is a crisis or a chronic um, issue on nutrition and X country, right, a lot of times we, as humanly natural, right, we go to the what is the quick action we can take this, right? So we think in producing food. And then we forgot the long-term resilience that is needed for it. Right? You can go there, you can send a team, you can send an expert and provide a solution. But then if no one is educated, if no one has the intention of using that system and making it something that has a long-term impact, then that is just going to be a short-term impact, right? So in the very least, there is not infrastructure and expertise available in food science so much as there is on the agriculture and nutrition space. So I think the takeaway is food scientists should invest time into raising the awareness, going to Donna's point, and then looking at ways on how we can build that expertise and infrastructure on those places where it is needed so that it can be a component of relief and development in the future.
Well, thanks for those insights. And certainly you're working on that, of course. Let's talk a little bit about the innovation that's happening on the ground. So FSRD has highlighted examples where food science has improved shelf life, nutrient density, safety, and cultural relevance of foods used in humanitarian settings. What are some innovations or success stories that might illustrate the power of food science to improve food security in low resource environments? Donna, let's start with you on this one.
Okay. I think it's important to remember that innovation in these contexts has, I think, more to do with the creative application of existing technology or materials that are tailored to low resource environments. So it's not, in my mind, inventing this new thing that's going to work in, developing country context. It's how do you we have a lot at our disposal as food scientists. There's so many technologies. The problem and the creativity is how do you modify that to work when there isn't enough resources, there isn't electricity, there isn't, it has to be low cost, it has to be very small scale. That's the innovation in my mind. And, getting into some of our cases, there's ingenuity and genius in every single case that we write about because every single one of them is solving a problem. And so some of these solutions are, to me, ingenious, and they're sometimes mind-blowing. And so we need to keep that in mind that, innovation is something a little bit different here. And so there's several instances, that I saw. One would be utilization of small-scale equipment to take the process from being something done by hand and something very tedious to scaling it up. You have to scale in order to do this. And we have a couple of examples, actually two that Randol worked on. One is called Bounty Field, and the other is produce small-scale extruders, where equipment was made and designed to work on what we would consider very small scale, but to them allows them to scale up. And another equipment innovation would be a moisture meter that addresses mycotoxins. This is something called GrainMate. And this was a modification of something that allowed this very important measurement to be made on small scale and done cheaply. And so that those two are important. And then there's others that we have that utilize underutilized crops that are locally grown and consumed, but use them as biofortification. So taking something locally, realizing that this is something that's really nutritious, but I'm going to put it in a different form. I'm going to make a flour out of a root vegetable or something. Bambara groundnut is one example. And then, solving a nutritional need. So those are just some examples of the wide variety of different types of projects that involve. But really, like I said, all of them are innovative in their own way, in that it takes a very creative mind to tackle these problems.
I was really thinking about that as you spoke. It just seems like it's a testament to human ingenuity and creativity.
This is what astounds me every time. I'm like, oh wow! Every time I read one of these cases. So yeah.
I can think about this the orange flesh sweet potato. Don't know if you remember that one. That one was one of our first ones.
Yeah.
What was interesting about this is this was a long project. It started back in early 2000, where they were working with different sweet potato varieties. Of course, they work on the agricultural side, making sure that they had high yields, that they adapted well to different weather, and they were able to do that. But then they found out that there was no adoption. No one was buying that sweet potato, right? As much as they were communicating that that sweet potato, because of the color it had, higher beta carotene, and then that helped to address vitamin A deficiency. As much as they communicated that, no one was really interested because that was not the usual way they were consuming. So then 10 years later, they came this group where they look at how can we incorporate this in a 60, 70% substitution ratio into this bread that everyone eats every day and everyone loves, right? Will they like it better? They did a lot of sensory work to work through different formulations of processed foods, mostly bread materials, bread products. And then they found out this is the formulation people like, this is the type of color they like, and this is the way we are going to make it. And after that, the adoption of that just exploded, right? So again, the crop was there, the benefit was there, but the way of delivering that raw material was different, right? There had to be a lot of sensory and consumer work to find the best way to drive consumer acceptability.
And also part of that project that I remember was that they made other discoveries. Sometimes there's a lot of serendipity involved, and they found that these orange flesh sweet potatoes they brought water to the dough. Yes. And so they could use less water, which is hard to come by and whatever. And they didn't have to use as much water in the dough. And it also improved the consistency. It made it into more like potato bread, this very soft, velvety texture. And people really like that. And they weren't aiming for those things, but these are the things that sort of come in that are like, oh my God, So yeah, very interesting.
Right.
We'll continue in a moment after a word from our sponsor, IFT Membership.
To the curious, to the bold, to the ones shaping the future of food, IFT is where you belong. As a member, you'll enjoy a global community united by purpose, driven by science, and ready to make a lasting impact on our food system. Connect with peers, thought leaders, and trusted experts. Stay on top of cutting-edge research and take your innovations and career further. You belong here. Become a member today at ift.org/join.
Welcome back. So one of the core principles of FSRD is building local capacity, which is something I think you've both been alluding to. So it's not just delivering products, but strengthening local food systems. Randol, would you want to talk a little bit about what capacity building looks like in practice and why it's so important for long-term food security?
Of course. Yes. Essentially, it's just, trying to strengthen the local food systems rather than just delivering aid, right? So what we've seen a lot of times is, grain or other type of food gets shipped from one part of the world to the other one where it's needed, and then it stays there, right? So rather than looking at the local capacity means how can we make the local resources available in a long-term solution on the site where they are needed, right? So for that, there is a lot that goes into place. First of all, enabling the communities to produce, process, and store and distribute food themselves, right? And there is these stages can be seen in a few of our articles, but you will see, right? This reminds me about pig packs, right? Technology developed by Purdue a lot of time ago, but now being used to store grains, so you avoid any infestations, right? Which is by insects, which is a lot of food losses, right? Then the other part is using the locally available ingredients, right? And building processes that can use those, right? A lot of our equipment is used to process the usual corn, wheat, and things like that. But if there are other local crops that have higher nutritional benefit, can we now modify those processes to allow them to get a flour, right, out of it when it is not usually done, right? And then providing training, right? You produce processed food, then how do you make it food stable, right? How do we make it food safe so that people can consume it with confidence, right?
Well, Donna, following up on that a little bit, and you alluded to this with the sweet potato ingredient in making the bread, but it does seem like it's really important to create products that are not only nutritious, but that will be accepted and people will want to eat. So how does food science help ensure that is the case? Do you want to talk about that a little more?
Yeah. In most of these contexts, the people are not, willing to adopt new foods. It's just they like their own things that they're accustomed to. So you have to do this in partnership with those who are going to implement it, and you have to make sure that you have to. It's another food science discipline called sensory evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand the culture and where they're coming from, and then ensure that it's going to be accepted by testing it with them and implementing it with people on the ground who know how to do that. So it's actually the same, kind of the same as it is in the West. You have to make sure that it's acceptable.
So now let's talk a little bit more about technology. Donna, would you say there are any emerging technologies such as low-cost processing equipment, novel preservation methods, or digital tools that you believe could be game changers for food security in the next decade? I know you said that it's not always about the newest technologies, but it's about using the technologies that already exist. But is there anything out there that's new that might be applied productively?
Yeah, I mean, as I think about this, and I hate to jump on this bandwagon, but artificial intelligence, because you can use AI, you can feed it a lot of complex information and tell it to come up with a solution. Maybe, tell it to look at a completely different industry. Let's say the cell phones, how did they make cell phones affordable to people in Africa for $1 a month or whatever it is? What can food science learn from that? And you could input a lot of data around the food that's available, the nutritional needs of the population, help me come up with solutions. And so it would draw far more data than a human brain could. And I think that, AI could bring more, let's say, input into the innovative process to help. And then it would take a human to implement that. But I would say that would be the biggest factor.
Okay, so big picture question for both of you. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what is your vision for the future of food science for relief and development? And what needs to happen across the humanitarian, academic, and food science communities to fully realize the potential of food science in global food security? And we'll start with Donna.
Yeah, so I alluded to this before, but I'm going to restate it. Food science needs better PR and awareness. And I think people don't understand that if you're going to make a food product in Africa or elsewhere, it has to be developed. And that's product development. That's food science. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that it's safe to eat. That's food science. That's food safety. You have to make sure that it's consistency, consistent over time. That's quality control and quality awareness. That's food science. Then you have to scale it and make it on some sort of equipment or processing. So that's process engineering. That's food science.
Okay, so big picture question for both of you. Looking ahead 5 to 10 years, what is your vision for the future of food science for relief and development? And what needs to happen across the humanitarian, academic, and food science communities to fully realize the potential of food science in global food security? We'll start with Donna.
Yeah, so I alluded to this before, but I'm going to restate it. Food science needs better PR and awareness. And I think people don't understand that if you're going to make a food product in Africa or elsewhere, it has to be developed. And that's product development. That's food science. Mm-hmm. You have to make sure that it's safe to eat. That's food science. That's food safety. You have to make sure that it's consistency, consistent over time. That's quality control and quality awareness. That's food science. Then you have to scale it and make it on some sort of equipment or processing. So that's process engineering. That's food science. And I think that if we make the community more aware of that, then that would go a long way. The other thing is that now with aid being cut, with USAID, going away, when we first started this, my answer to this would have been, we have to work with the donor community to get them to open up projects that utilized food science and food processing. Well, that's not true anymore. In a few years, a lot can change. And so I think that we have to focus more on private sector development. And again, getting back to the microenterprises, it's going to be up to small businesses to take on this challenge of making these new food products, making these nutritious food products, of reducing waste, locally, so that food is available in lean times. And I think that we have to enable businesses either through financing, through technical assistance, through business assistance. If we enable that, then the whole industries, around the developing world will pop up around food.
Randol, your thoughts on the same question?
Yes. So I think for me is hoping that there are more young scientists, more young food scientists passionate for this, right? In my case, right, I mentioned that I learned all this cool stuff at school about, I could make this cutting edge technology, this cutting edge research, which at some point is going to be useful, right? But there will be just so much benefit in this world if the current technology that we all know already will be just more distributed to other parts of the world where we don't have it yet, right? So hopefully professors and other trainers in academia, in other settings, they try to include more components of how food science can be important for relief and development within their curricula. And that brings more people feeling empowered to do stuff like this. And the other part will be go and read about the cases, right? Maybe some of the innovative ways that people have approached those projects can be replicated with a different crop in your home country or in the home country of a friend.
Okay. Well, you alluded to the case studies. And before we wrap up, I'd like to get Donna to tell us a little bit about the work that Food Science for Relief and Development does with case studies.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue. So for those who are now hopefully interested in this, of course, this is an initiative under IFT. To my knowledge, we are the only group who is writing up case studies around these projects. There are tons of millions of case studies in the aid arena, but we're the only ones that are focusing on the food science aspects of it. How do you assure, a consistent supply, and how do you do that? We're delving into the food science on it. We work on a volunteer basis. People come to us. We write cases in pairs. So it takes 2 writers together on each case, and they will do the background desk work, and they will interview the organization that they're writing about several times. And we have a template that we use, and we have a database of topics that they can choose from, or they can bring their own. We have criteria that are strict criteria that we set up that they have to meet in order to get written up. And we have 3 reviewers that review every case. So it's quite a process. We have to make sure you have good writing skills as well. So it's quite disciplined. And anyone who would like to know more, I would send you to our webpage. Or if you can go to the IFT, and search food science for relief and development, you can find it probably. Read the cases. This is the only repository of information about this area is on this page, the whole, all in one place. And you can get a hold of me. And we can start the process if you're interested.
Well, Donna and Randol, thank you so much for the work you're doing and for sharing your insights about it with our Side Dish listeners. Your work is such a powerful reminder that food science has a really vital role to play in feeding the world, especially in places where the need is the greatest. And also thanks to this episode's sponsor, IFT Membership. IFT is your community for trusted knowledge, lifelong learning, and meaningful experiences and connections. Join us today at ift.org/join. Learn more about food science for relief and development on the IFT website at content.ift.org/FSRD.
And that concludes this episode of Omnivore Presents Side Dish. Thanks again to our guests for another amazing discussion. Side Dish is produced by the Institute of Food Technologists and the editors of Food Technology magazine. To learn more about IFT and how we convene global food system professionals to advance the science of food, visit IFT.org. If you're not already a member, head to IFT.org/membership to find your place in the IFT community. For more insights, ideas, and innovation, check out our sister podcast, Omnivore, on the News and Publications page of IFT.org. Join us again next month for another timely discussion. This is Omnivore Presents Side Dish.